Welcome to Opposition Territory here at the Philadelphia Sports Table Podcast Show, the longest-running weekly Philly sports podcast show in the world. 12 years strong. We got a great discussion coming your way this week. We have a great guest. Always love talking to him on an annual basis. He is from great SB Nation site, Silver and Black Pride. He also does some work over at Bleacher Report as well with regard to the NFL Draft. We've got our good friend Matt Holder. How you doing, buddy?
Good. How are you doing, Jeff? Thanks for having me back on again.
Yeah, you got it, buddy. I'm doing all right, man. I'm really excited for the start of this NFL season. I'm really excited to see what's going to happen in the AFC West, in particular with the Las Vegas Raiders. And we're going to be diving into this team right here on our show here. Look, this Raiders team, in my opinion, they've had a very interesting offseason. Brand new quarterback in Geno Smith. They extended Max Crosby, safety Jeremy Chin. He got a 2-year deal. Pete Carroll's hired as the new head coach. Chip Kelly coming in as the new offensive coordinator. Lots of moves happening with this team and organization that has been, I guess you would say, rather stagnant over the year.
Yeah, I can say that.
Yeah. So how should NFL fans really be looking at viewing the Las Vegas Raiders offseason at this point? And what grade would you actually give the Raiders front office on what they did during this offseason and why?
Yeah, so I think the Raiders team, I think they do have a chance to kind of surprise a lot of people, be one of those slept-on teams that not a lot of people are considering this season. I am tempering expectations a little bit. I kind of expect them to be in that 7 to 9 win range where they're, flirting with the playoffs, but maybe not quite getting there. Playing in the AFC West is tough. I mean, that division sent 3 teams to the playoffs last year. And I think it's reasonable to expect that all 3 teams could easily be back this year. And hopefully the Raiders are in that mix. But again, it's a tough division where you have 3 quarterbacks who are very good or 3 quarterbacks who are on opposing teams who are very good. And then you throw in Geno Smith in the mix. Like, it's probably the best quarterback division in the league. I don't know if you can find one that's much better. I know the NFC East has some good ones too. The Giants are just kind of picking up the caboose there, that holding you guys back down. But with the Raiders, I think you touched on it. Like, adding Geno Smith gives them the best quarterback that they've had since they moved on from Derek Carr. What was that? Almost 4 years ago now.
Right.
So I think they can definitely be competitive this upcoming season, where they might surprise some people beat some teams that aren't expecting them to, that you're not expecting them to beat and stuff like that. I do think it will take a little bit for everyone to gel, like you mentioned. New head coach, new offensive coordinator, and Chip Kelly, who Eagles fans know well.
Yes, we do.
At least I'll say this: at least he's not the head coach and the GM. That's
there you go.
Always my. I thought it was his undoing out in Philly, but
right.
Just with all the moving parts, it's going to be tough for them to gel. And I think, especially in the beginning of this season, they might have some bumps and bruises and growing pains and stuff like that. But I can really see this team kind of starting to take off in that second half of the season once they get a little more familiarity with each other. And as far as like what grade I'd give the front office, I've said all along, probably the B to B minus team range. So, I think. Yeah. And like I said, I think getting Geno is a big part of that. It's a big part of what keeps them above the C range, because that was huge. And like I said, the best quarterback they've had in the last few years. And I do think Geno is one of the more underrated guys in the league, and kind of fits in with what the Raiders mantra has been throughout their entire history, especially going into this season. And then on top of it, I liked what new GM John Spytek did, in that he wasn't going to overpay for players. The first one that comes to mind is Trevon Merrick, who was the starting safety the last 4 years for the Raiders. I love Trevon Merrick. I don't know if I'd give him $17 million a year. That was a pretty hefty contract.
A lot, yeah.
But on the other end of that is they did sacrifice talent. Robert Spillane's another guy that ended up leaving, that they kind of replaced. They're trying to replace in the aggregate, if you will, if anybody's a Moneyball fan, with just bringing in a bunch of different other linebackers to replicate his production. Divine Diablo was the other starting linebacker last year. I don't think he's a huge loss, but hey, that's another starter that's gone. Nate Hobbs was manning the slot for them for a few years. He's gone too. So they're replacing quite a bit on the defensive side of the ball. And like I said, the bargain hunting is great, except when you look at the talent that's left on the roster. And I think that you look at this defense, there are a lot of question marks on that side of the ball. Both starting cornerbacks are up for the takings during training camp. The nickel spot is another question mark. We're going to breaking in 2 new safeties this past year. Marcus Epps, former Eagle, is another guy that left in free agency. 2 new starting linebackers. Christian Wilkins right now, we're not sure exactly what his health status is. And then Malcolm Kuntz is the second defensive end behind Max Crosby, who's coming off a torn ACL and missed all of last season.
Yeah.
That makes me a little bit cautious. That's kind of where I go, where again, I think they can be competitive, but there's so many moving parts that it's hard for me to be like, yeah, this team's going to be a playoff team or anything like that. They're going to be winning double-digit games. That's kind of where I'm at this season.
I think, Matt, when I'm looking at this Raiders team as somebody on the outside of, of course I love, NFL, I follow just about every team and what they're doing, but it seems like now more than ever, there is a bit of quote vision from the Raiders front office. Like I'm getting that vibe that there is some sort of vision for where they want to go in the future. Yes, Geno Smith may not be the franchise quarterback that leads them to a Super Bowl, perhaps at some point down the road, but there is a vision, I think, when it comes to what the offense could be, what the defense, where they could go into the future. And I think it's one of the first times in many, many years that we have seen a quote vision coming from the Raiders front office. That's how I see it.
Yeah, no, I can definitely agree with that. I think, you look at the moves that they made, there's definitely been a clear lineage of what they want to do. And Pete Carroll comes in, he definitely wants to win right away. He's going to be 74 by the time October rolls around, or mid-September, I should say.
Right.
So he doesn't have too much time to be wasting, but I think you can definitely see there's a clear directive. And I think John Spytek, the new GM, is a big part of that too.
Yeah, I want to get into Geno Smith a little bit more with you, because I think it's safe to say that Geno Smith is definitely, while we're talking about it here, of course, an upgrade at quarterback, given what we've seen from the Raiders quarterbacks over the past few years. And while he had that bit of resurgence in Seattle, definitely, again, being that upgrade, I'm just wondering what his ceiling is at this point during his career, Matt. Like, what do you expect Geno Smith to give this offense that it didn't have before, and to potentially get them to another level, to that competitive level that Pete Carroll wants to get them to? What are your thoughts here?
I mean, I think the biggest thing with Geno Smith that he brings that they haven't had in a few years is the deep ball. I think last look at their quarterbacks that they've brought in since Carr, Jimmy Garoppolo, never known for his arm strength. Gardner Minshew, definitely not known for his arm strength. Even Aiden O'Connell, who they drafted a couple of years ago, doesn't have the strongest arm in the world. And that really hurt their offense, and especially their passing game. And it impacts the running game too, because teams could just play with an extra safety in the box and have that extra defender to account for the running game. So I think Geno, him being able to push the ball down the field and being pretty darn good at it, like just even in his down years, that's kind of always has been one of his biggest strengths ever since he kind of had that career resurgence with Seattle, even last season, which was one of his down years. He was still pushing the ball down the field and being pretty accurate while doing so. And there's, when I look at this receiving core and we look at the Raiders offense, that's something that's been lacking this past year. And I think, look at a guy like Brock Bowers. One of Brock Bowers' strengths is that he can kind of move like a wide receiver. And I think if you can open up the passing game, that's just going to make him even better. They have a receiver that probably a lot of people don't know about named Trey Tucker, who is a great deep threat. Yeah. And it's funny. He's a great deep threat, and he had 20 targets last year and only 5 catches. And a big part of that was because so many balls were uncatchable. There was a stat that I forget who was floating around. Wish I could give them credit, but Trey Tucker had the 4th most uncatchable targets last season.
Oh my gosh.
So I think, you give him a guy that a quarterback like Geno Smith, who perfectly fits his skill set. I think he can be a lot like what Tyler Lockett and Geno were a few years ago, because Tucker and Lockett have a lot of the same skill sets, same size, and that kind of stuff. So I'm definitely optimistic about what Geno can bring as far as his ceiling. Year one, again, gelling with a lot of new moving pieces, playing in a new offense, new offensive line, and then of course new receivers. Maybe not get to this level right away, but I think he kind of his ceiling is capped at being like a Pro Bowler, which he's been in the past. And then, as far as the floor goes, that could be up for debate as well. We've seen Geno flame out in the past, but I definitely think he can at least play at a Pro Bowl level. It's just a matter of how quickly can those guys build some chemistry together.
Yeah, you talk about the gelling of what is going to happen with regard to this offense. Geno Smith, he needs to get to the ball into the hands of these weapons on offense. And when we look at the receivers on this Raiders team, including the tight end group, I do wonder if Geno Smith is going to have that chemistry with guys like Jacoby Myers, Trey Tucker, you just mentioned, Dante Thornton. Brock Bowers is definitely the star receiver, on this team. where do you see Geno and these receivers on this team really trying to take that chemistry that everybody is going to look for? How do we know if it's going to be, I mean, aside from completions, yards, things like that, in terms of the chemistry, how are we going to see all that manifesting itself? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that with the Raiders offense is they have a good amount of guys who are pretty consistent after the catch.
Yeah.
Brock Bowers being one of them. Brock Bowers is unique again as a tight end where he almost is better with the ball in his hands. Remember at Georgia, they get him involved in the running game.
Right.
He was taking like 70 yard jet sweeps to the house and stuff like that. And I think where I look at chemistry with a lot of quarterbacks and their weapons is it's the ball coming out in time and hitting the receiver in stride, and that's what kind of leads to the yak and stuff like that. So I think that's one of the big indicators of how well these guys are gelling and how well they're kind of on the same page. Because I think that's going to be a huge factor in this offense as a whole, and then on top of it, how productive these receivers can be. So hopefully they can figure that out and get that all squared away in training camp and hit the ground running. Realistically, probably looking at more like October for that offense to really start taking off, and maybe even into November, which is unfortunate because that's half the season. But that's just the way it goes when you bring in a new quarterback and are bringing in one new one every year. So
absolutely, it's the nature of football, especially in the NFL. And again, folks, we are talking to Matt Holder. You can check out all of his content over at silverandblackpride.com. They're doing some great things over there. And also, if you are new to watching us here on YouTube at the Philadelphia Sports Table Podcast Show, if you are listening on various audio platforms as well, here are our social media sites for viewers on YouTube. We are on Instagram. We're on the Twitter/X. I'm over on TikTok at Mr. Jeff Warren. Facebook, Threads, also Blue Sky. You can search out my co-hosts and myself there, as well as the show. We're going to be taking a quick break here to pay some bills. We're going to be back in just a bit with more Raiders talk for you. All right, we are back here with our good friend from silverandblackpride.com, Matt Holder. Great discussion so far, and we're going to be getting into some more Raiders talk here. And specifically, as we're continuing the discussion with the offense here, I got to get into Ashton Jeanty, the third-round pick in this past NFL draft. I cannot wait to see what he is going to do on the field and how he's going to help to alter the rushing attack for this Raiders team. I mean, so dominant in college, but some have wondered if some of those skills are really going to transfer over immediately to the pro football level here. What are your thoughts on what we're going to be seeing from Jeanty this coming season as a rookie, Matt?
Yeah, I think Genty's got a pretty high ceiling this coming year. I think first and foremost, he's going to be the lead back in the Raiders backfield. Part of the reason why they took him 6th overall was they didn't really have many other options. Raheem Mostert's the running back number 2 right now, and Mostert's I think 33, turning 34 years old, and kind of past his prime. So I think Genty's definitely going to get plenty of touches this past year. As far as his transition to the NFL, I'm honestly not that worried about it. I go back and watch some of his games last year. He played really well against Oregon, where he broke off a few runs and made a bunch of guys miss. And I mean, that Oregon defense had, off the top of my head, five guys that got drafted in the NFL last year.
Right.
And he was making some of them look silly. And I think, his ability to make guys miss will translate. And the other part of it too is he has really good vision, which I think when you think of the smaller school running backs, sometimes when those guys don't transition well is just because they could just hit a hole and kind of be faster and shiftier than everyone else. Whereas you look at what Jeanty did last year at Boise State, there were a lot of guys in the backfield right away. That offensive line was not very good for him last year, especially against those higher competition.
Yeah.
And he still went out and produced. I know I'm sure some of you guys remember the Penn State game, and I know that kind of gets knocked on him.
Oh, yeah.
It's funny. You look at his stats, and I mean, he still almost had like 100 yards in that game, and I know he had his lowest yards per carry, but that was legitimately like the best example I could have given of. There were literally just guys in his face from the snap, from the time he touched the ball. He was having to make guys miss. And I remember going back and watching the film on that. There were plays where Penn State was just putting 8-9 guys in the box and basically saying, beat us with someone else, which was a great strategy. Obviously, it ended up working. But the point where I'm going there is if you actually go back and look on PFF, that was one of Genty's like most missed tackles forced in a game. And it was pretty impressive, the fact that he was able to get the numbers he did. My biggest question from that game, though, are the fumbles. I think that's going to be his biggest issue going into the NFL. He had 9 in the last 2 years, and then 10 in his entire time at Boise State in 3 seasons. Obviously, that's got to get cleaned up. And if you start giving up the rock and as a rookie, it doesn't matter where you're drafted from, they're going to be moving down on the depth chart. So that's the one thing I really want to see him get cleaned up this season. And then from there, it's just kind of expanding what he can do in the passing game. But yeah, I'm optimistic about Jeanty, and I don't have as much worry about him or hesitation about him making the transition to the NFL as a rusher. It's just
Okay.
biggest thing is can he hold on to the ball and figure out how to get more involved in the passing game.
We're going to see a lot more power coming from this Raiders offense for sure, folks. But I want to move over to the defense now here with you, Matt, because this Raiders team is in a division with the likes of the Chiefs, the Chargers, the Broncos. All three of those teams are likely going to be playing some pretty good football from an offensive point, this coming season. You mentioned it right at the top of the discussion as well. I mean, I'm wondering, how do you think this Raiders defense is going to stand up in terms of these teams in the AFC West? I know you kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, but if you can get into maybe a little bit more detail, I mean, is it going to be something we're going to see with this Raiders team where they actually can be competitive from a defensive standpoint? What are your thoughts here?
That's, I think, one of the things that's going to really hold them back. Like I was talking about in the intro, they're replacing, several starters, probably about half the defense. If I had to go back and look at and like tally it up, I mean, basically the entire second half or the second and third levels are brand new starters. If you compare the week one rosters, so I definitely am concerned about that. And then on top of it, you have Christian Wilkins, who suffered a setback. Christian Wilkins broke his foot, had a Jones fracture, and had surgery on it in week 5 last season, which obviously impacted their defense. He was the big free agent signing a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And he only played in 4.5 games last season, then came to OTAs, and it came out that he suffered a setback, and either the screw that they put in there broke or he re-broke the bone. Now they're hoping he's going to be able to come back for the start of the regular season, but he had to have surgery again, missed all of the spring. So if he's not back, I get even less confidence in that defense, because he factors to be a big part of it, as I'm sure you can imagine. I mean, he was excellent against the run last year, and was a really good interior pass rusher who helped set things up for guys. Like if you go back and look at Max Crosby's stats game by game, like I think he came out of the gates with like 4 sacks or something like that in the first few games. And then after Wilkins got hurt, his production went way down because teams could just focus on him, especially without having Malcolm Kuntz on that other side.
Yeah.
And that's kind of another big injury question is Kuntz 2 years ago was really good. He finished with, I believe it was 9 sacks, had 8 sacks in like the last 9 games for the Raiders, and looked like he was going to be an ascending player and going to be going into a contract year where he could make a ton of money. He tears an ACL about a week after training camp last season and missed the entire year. So I'm hopeful that he can kind of come back, but obviously coming off a major injury, there's a lot of question marks about what he can do. And outside of that second half of 2023, he's kind of hasn't done much throughout his career. So there's a lot of question marks where depends on kind of how it gets answered this upcoming season, and who kind of steps up and replaces the missing starters, and who can recover from injury, and who's just healthy at the end of the day. So it's definitely a big mark. And I think if we go back and look at the Raiders team at the end of the season, if they aren't meeting expectations, I would be willing to bet that it's because they had too many question marks on the defensive side of the ball, and we're probably giving up too many points this past season. That even with all the moving parts on offense, I think they have a few more answers on offensively than they do defensively going into the season. Because, like I said, the nickel spot, right now, no one, it's anyone's guess who's gonna start there after Nate Hobbs is gone. So.
Going to be interesting to follow for sure. Again, folks, talking to Matt Holder from silverandblackpride.com. Matt, can you tell everybody out there where they can find you and the work that you're doing in case they want to follow you on the interwebs out there?
Yeah, so I'm up on Twitter at I'mHolder95. Post all my stuff over there. Like I said, do a lot of NFL draft stuff with Bleacher Report. Have a YouTube channel too where we do some Raiders film breakdowns. Once we get into the draft season and free agency and stuff like that, we'll focus a little bit more on the draft, a little bit more all-encompassing and whatnot. But yeah, we'll definitely be looking forward to this season. And guys, give me a follow. Check out what I have over on Twitter, and go from there.
That's a great follow, folks. And to close us out here, Matt, we were talking on the Table Talk interview show this past week about how the Raiders could very well be one of those NFL teams that really surprises the masses this coming season. I think that's a very real possibility, quite frankly. They could be the most improved team when the season is all said and done, at least in my opinion. What is a sneaky under the radar storyline that we should really be keeping our eyes on as the season is right around the corner with this Raiders team?
I think one of the biggest ones is Chip Kelly's in his what is this? I guess third chance in the NFL since he had that little
Yes.
stint with the Niners.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think kind of seeing how his offense migrates and how he's adapted it. When he was with Philly, one of the big problems was the innovative offense, the hurry up was caught people by surprise at first, and then once everyone kind of caught up, it just became too simple.
Right.
And I think one of the things that I like about Chip is he's very adaptable. He's not one of these coaches that's stuck in his scheme. If you compare what he was running at Oregon to what he was running at UCLA and Ohio State this last year, it's similar, but there are a lot of different concepts involved in his offense. And I think he's become a more innovative offensive coordinator. I think his time in the NFL humbled him a little bit. I think he got a little too arrogant, especially in those last few years in Philly.
Yep.
But I think that's kind of something that I'm interested in seeing is how he kind of makes that shift and how innovative he can be offensively and kind of make it work, because he's a very different coach, I will say, than this first stint with the Eagles, because I'm an Oregon fan also. So I've always loved Chip Kelly and loved those offenses in the early 2010s that he was running.
Yeah.
So be interesting to see with this past season.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be great. It's going to be so interesting to see where the Raiders go. And folks, the NFL season is almost upon us here. Again, he is Matt Holder. Matt, buddy, thank you so much for taking the time to jump on. You're so good to jump on the show at least once or twice a year. I'd love to talk to you at some point down the road, my friend.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, appreciate you for having me on. Become an annual tradition at this point.